And we're going to hide this little box too. There we go. So thank you for coming. Welcome to COVID-19 Rounding the Corner. This program is brought to you by a grant funded by the United Way of Lake County. Along with Elderwerks, they're concerned about how everyone is feeling a year and a half after the beginning of this pandemic, where we have been, where we are now, and where we are going. I hope you find this informative and it helps answer some of those questions you may still have. This program is presented in a nonpartisan format. The information on this program is cited at the end, but most information comes from the World Health Organization, the Center of Disease Control, and the Illinois Department of Public Health, following the findings of science. The information in this program remains fluid and is not the direct opinion of Elderwerks or the United Way. However, both share the opinions that this information is important in the development and rationalization of individual opinions and reflect an interest in the well-being of the public at large as it relates to the pandemic. As Barbara said, my name is Petrik. I'm a registered nurse who has been in healthcare for over 40 years in various settings, from bedside to education and then to older adult care. While I may not know any of you personally, I, like many of you, have lost someone to COVID, a loved one survived COVID, and know that we all now we know what a long hauler of COVID is also. We'll talk about that. So our quick review, we're gonna review the description of COVID-19, where it came from, how it affects the body and how it mutates, review the timeline up to current time. Why does it affect other groups more than others? How did quarantine help us? Some of the most up-to-date statistics, vaccine types and how they work, side effects and outcomes. What is herd immunity and does it really work? Some of the changes in guidelines, questions and answers, how we continue to mitigate an acceleration of the pandemic, and how are we preparing for another pandemic? So what is coronavirus COVID-19? It's a human coronavirus that was first identified in the middle 1960s. There are 7 coronaviruses listed that affect people worldwide. Most common around the world that affects humans are 229E, NL63, OC43, and HKU1. The Indian variant, named B1617, has been reported in some 17 countries, raising global concern. Other human coronaviruses that we have seen in the past, we saw the MERS COVID, which started near the peninsula of Saudi Arabia in May 2014. MERS is more deadly than COVID-19 as it kills 3 out of every 10 people infected. It is a respiratory illness that causes pneumonia. There were 2 cases in the United States, one in Florida and one in Indiana, and both had recently returned from Saudi Arabia as healthcare workers. SARS-CoV, or SARS-CoV, is a severe respiratory syndrome that is transmitted via respiratory droplets and close contact with other humans. It started in Asia in February 2003, spread to more than 24 countries until it just fizzled out. There has not been any other cases of SARS worldwide since 2004. So we'll look at the timeline. This is just really a basic review of when it started, and I'm sure we all remember that. 12/31 is when Wuhan reported their first cluster cases of pneumonia, and the novel virus was identified. And then we go look down here, and that's when World Health Organization, or the WHO, picked up on it, and they sent a incident management team out to Wuhan. The WHO also reports via social media the cluster of pneumonia with deaths in Wuhan. And then on the 5th of January 2020, they published their first report. If we go down here to 112, China publicly shares the genetic sequence of novel COVID-19. And then it jumps. The first case was confirmed in Thailand. And then but down here on 3/11, WHO officially characterized COVID-19 as a pandemic. So the WHO from here on was really working from 1/1 to 3/11, was really working with China and other countries to isolate this virus, because they knew the one thing they know about viruses is they mutate. And so they were really needing to get a grip on, find out what the original thing was, so they could work on what's going to happen when it mutates. What President Biden is doing now is they're doing another look back. And you may have heard that on the news recently, that they're looking at this timeline again, because there's always been some chatter that this was either developed by humans in a lab in Wuhan, or it may be reported also that it kind of jumped and came out of the lab. So, obviously someone carried it out unknowingly, but they really want to look at that, because that helps us for the next pandemic. So when you hear that President Biden is issuing another look back, I don't want you to feel panicked. I think it's an appropriate response, since there was never any definitive conclusion to that. This here was all speculation. And so what he wants to do is get a real grasp on what the true facts are. So again, not to become anxious about that. How the virus works. COVID-19 starts as a viral pneumonia, which causes acute respiratory syndrome. COVID-19 has the ability to bind to our cells in our body as much as 1,000 times greater than SARS. So SARS might be a little bit deadlier, but this really mutates quicker and replicates, I should say. So along with its ability to bind and being more infectious, it can be more deadly in the fact that it will affect more people. The molecular structure of the virus begins with a spike shape that juts out of the membrane envelope. This is where it gets its name corona, which means crown in Spanish, because these spikes look like a crown. When the virus enters your body, and it can enter your body, either your mouth, your nose, or your eyes, it travels to spots that have something called ACE or ACE2 receptors, and we call them ACE2 receptors. The spike on the virus attaches to our ACE2 receptors, which then begins the replication process. It begins the cycle of replication, which allows it to replicate the virus inside of our body, releasing and spewing virus through the body, especially in other areas of ACE2 receptors, which are the lungs, the kidneys, the livers, the intestines, and lastly, transmissible to give this virus to someone else. So again, these ACE2 receptors are in our liver, our lungs, our kidneys, and our intestines, and that's why it goes, and it starts out in the lungs, but it really kind of gains ground, and then you end up with something called multi-system organ failure. So why did it affect other groups more than others? Well, the immune system protects us, and if it's functioning properly, it identifies and attacks a variety of threats, including viruses, bacteria, and parasites, while distinguishing them from the body's own healthy tissues. The lymphatic system consists of bone marrow, spleen, thymus, and lymph nodes. And again, that's all part of the immune system. And if your immune system is working correctly, it should prevent this. As the immune system, the body has several other ways to defend itself against microbes, including our skin, which is a waterproof barrier that secretes oil with bacteria killing properties. Then there's the lungs. Mucus in the lungs, or the phlegm, traps foreign particles, and the small hairs, the cilia, in the digestive tract, that traps the bacteria too. And the mucus lining in your gut contains antibodies that can fight against this. So there are various groups at some point in their life that will have a decline in their immune system, or their immune system will be immature. The ones with the immature immune systems are the infants and the people that might have a slight decline in their own system would be a pregnant woman because she's really using her immune system to help grow that baby. And then you see the immune system dip again in adolescence as they're, starting to change from adolescent to adult. So 12 to 18, you might see a dip in their immune system. And then we see it again in older adults. So there are several times in our life where our immune system just isn't working properly. Sometimes medications cause problems and can lower your immune system. For example, prednisone is a medication that lowers your immune system. And then people who have autoimmune diseases also have lower immune systems. And many of the autoimmune diseases are controlled by using medications such as prednisone. So you have an autoimmune disease, and on top of that, you're taking a medication that causes an autoimmune response. You're really in a high risk area. The rest really is economics, and we look at social economic groups. The lower the social economic group, the lower the lack of education. Also, the lower is the lack of immediate healthcare response. They may not have an emergency room. They might be in one of those healthcare islands where the hospitals or the clinics have closed. They may not have money to go to the doctor, and they may not be able to really pay attention to what other people are doing. That's why there's a real push in those lower social economic areas to get people vaccinated. And then the other thing is media, because media can send you the wrong information, and along with that is it can control and form opinions that might not be appropriate. So what's a wave? In a pandemic, a wave is the curve of any outbreak which reflects over the rise and fall of the number of cases over a defined period. The wave ends only when the virus has been contained and cases have fallen exponentially. So we're in that wave right now. We're down, and we're doing pretty good right now. We have about 60% of our population that have taken the vaccine. And we'll talk about herd immunity, but we need a little bit more. That's why President Biden is really pushing, and a lot of the states are offering incentives. So does coronavirus attack in waves? The most well-known reason for multiple waves is the mutation in the genetic code of the virus. The virus adapts and then it mutates, and that really causes it to go up. The appearance of the virus changes continuously, and it can bypass antibodies that were produced and developed for this, and then, or it adapts to it, so the antibiotics don't help anymore. The other thing that will cause a wave is the strain changes, and then you see the next wave. There's variants that cause the wave to go up and down, and variants are just viruses that mutate and evolve. There also can be changes in the viral genome. And so we know that, and be aware that most mutations are harmless. Some are deadlier, but typically we kind of can jump on it and take care of it. So again, this is pretty much what a wave looks like and why it is caused. And we're right here, on the downslope of that. So we also have phases. Phase 1 is the first phase, is during which the virus replicates. You may have mild symptoms. The second phase happens in 7 to 10 days. You might see the inflammatory response start kicking in, which attacks the body cells, and the person may start to feel sick. Steroids are generally administered during that time. And then in the third phase, which we call long COVID or post-COVID syndrome, and those are your long haulers, many symptoms may take a long time to fade. For example, the DG146 mutant attacks the body respiratory cells more rapidly than the original coronavirus, and that was not a 6. And let me repeat that mutant. gene. It's D614G, not 6. I apologize for that. WHO has 4 variants of concern that they're looking at, the latest being the one we found in India, which is B1617. And it now has affected more than 50 countries globally. The time in the second wave, the percentage of the adult population that was exposed was about 21%, and a small proportion was observed in children. So again, this just kind of tells you phase 1 is when the virus enters your body and it starts to replicate, and that takes a couple of days. Then phase 2 is when you really start feeling crummy. And then phase 3 is your long haulers. So a lot of people say, you know, we had to stay in. How did quarantine really help us? It really helps in the loss of production or the reproduction of the virus. So you have patient 0 here, and then that person goes out, he or she goes out and affects these 2 people, and then they infect 2 people, and they infect 2 people, and then they infect 2, and so on. And you can see how this would keep going. And many of you had been in a situation like that where, you know, you still weren't sure about this quarantine thing, and you might have gone to a family party, or you may have gone to a funeral, and you hear about people within that group getting sick over a period of a week or 2. So it just spreads from one person to the other. So really, quarantine does help. As a matter of fact, let me tell you that in New Zealand, what they did, and they can afford to do this, they're a small island, they don't have the population that the United States has, but they did a real hard shutdown for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that, they did a soft shutdown, but everything was shut down, everything for 2 weeks. No one was allowed out, period. And then they started opening things up a little bit, and they have had very little COVID in New Zealand. And the president or governor, the leader of New Zealand, said if she had to do it again, she would do it again, because looking at the percentage of COVID in her country based in other countries, it was significantly smaller. So I looked up, and the best statistic I could get was on May 28th. Global, we had 171 million confirmed cases with 3.6 million deaths. I looked up the Spanish flu of 1918, and it was about 3.5 million. So we didn't do a whole lot better globally than they did back then. The United States, we have 33 million confirmed cases, and again, that was of May 28th, and we had 592,000 deaths. In Illinois, we had 1.3 million confirmed cases and 22,000 deaths. And as of today, we are down about 13%. So we're doing really well in Illinois. And you can find all this information on the CDC and the World Health Organization, the WHO websites. As a matter of fact, when you Google it and it pulls up, it'll say the WHO, but then right under that, it'll say WHO COVID. Same thing for CDC, same thing for Illinois IDPH, Illinois Department of Public Health. So it's very, it's easy information to get. This just talks a little bit about what happens when we need to really start working on things quickly and get them approved.
Americans rely on the FDA to evaluate whether medical products, such as drugs, diagnostic tests, and other medical devices, have been shown to be safe and effective. When a public health emergency hits, like the infectious disease outbreak we're facing with COVID-19, there may be an urgent need for products to diagnose, treat, or prevent a medical threat. In certain types of emergencies, the FDA can issue an Emergency Use Authorization, or EUA, to provide more timely access to drugs, diagnostic tests, or other critical medical products that may help during the emergency when there are no adequate, approved, and available options. The EUA process is different than full approval of these products because in some emergency situations, we just cannot wait for all the evidence needed for full FDA approval. Instead, the FDA evaluates the options very quickly using the evidence that is available and carefully balances any known or potential risks of these unproven products with any known or potential benefits to the public of making them available during the emergency. For example, while we need to move quickly, it is not in the best interest of Americans for the FDA to allow use of a test that doesn't work as it should. False test results can contribute to the spread of an infectious disease like COVID-19. EUAs are just one of several tools the FDA can use to help make important medical products available quickly during emergencies. For more information on FDA's efforts against COVID-19, please visit fda.gov.
So that talks a little bit about how
Americans rely
that talks a little bit about how the FDA looks at testing and drugs and works on getting them out there. And in something like this, we needed to accelerate that process. The one thing I learned in nursing school many, many years ago, and I think this is a lesson that is learned during COVID, is medicine is not an exact science. It never has been and it never will be, because we're working with nature and we don't have the answers to everything. And that's why, and I know it frustrated people, and myself included, when we would get some news one day about something and then it would change the next day. And that's because the next day we learned something new about this virus. Remember, we knew nothing about this when it started. So we were learning, the FDA and World Health Organization and the CDC was learning along with us. The nice thing is they have brilliant scientists who help us understand this and get answers for us. But again, it's not an exact science. With that said, and they mentioned testing, if you've ever taken a strep test and they do a rapid stress, it may be negative and then you still feel sick, and they do a regular one that takes about 24 hours to return, and you'll find out you're positive on that. And that happened to some people with the testing, and that's why they did rapid tests followed by the long-term test, because usually a positive is usually positive, but a negative can always be a positive. And that's not always true, but that's true a lot of the time. So that's why sometimes they'll have you do a rapid and then they'll have you do the 24-hour after that. That said, let's talk about some of the vaccines, and those came out very quickly, but keep in mind that that the FDA went through a whole approval system. The reason it didn't take as long as it did is because there's really no urgency in some of the other drugs that they're looking at right now. And what they did, and the reason they were able to do this, was they took their their workforce and they poured themselves into looking at what they could do to produce a vaccine that was appropriate. So to understand how COVID-19 vaccine works, it helps to look at how our bodies fight illness. When germs such as the virus that causes COVID-19 invade our bodies, they attack and multiply. The invasion, called an infection, is what causes the illness. Our immune system uses several tools to fight that infection. Blood contains red blood cells, which carry oxygen to tissues and organs, and white or immature blood cells, which fight infection. Different types of white blood cells fight infection in different ways. There's macrophages, which are the white blood cells that eat and digest all the dead and dying cells. The macrophages leave behind parts of that invading germ called antigens. The body identifies the antigens as dangerous and stimulates an antibody response to attack them. Okay, so the macrophages come in, they eat it up, they leave a few pieces of it around. Those are called antigens. The body senses that there's something in there, and they build the body starts to work on antibodies. Also, the B lymphocytes are defensive white blood cells. They produce antibodies that attack the pieces of the virus left behind by the macrophages, but they're another type of defense. They attack cells in the body that have already been infected. The first time a person is infected with the virus that causes COVID-19, it takes several days or weeks for their body to make and use all the germ-fighting tools needed to get over that infection. After the infection, the person's immune system remembers what is learned about how to protect the body against the disease. The body keeps a few T lymphocytes called memory cells, and that goes into action quickly if the body encounters the same virus again. When the familiar antigens are detected by the B lymphocytes produce antibodies to attack them. Experts are still learning how long these memory cells protect a person against the virus that causes COVID-19. So COVID-19 vaccines help our body develop immunity to the virus that causes COVID-19 without us having to get sick, and that's the important part. Different types of vaccines work in different ways to protect. So if we look at these mRNA, these are actually working with the red blood cells and the macrophages. This is the viral vector, and the viral vector is a little bit different. That actually comes in and it gives you a little bit of the virus. So viral vector contain a modified version of a different virus than the one that causes COVID-19. This is called that viral vector. Once the viral vector is inside our cells that causes COVID-19, using the instructions, our cells make copies of the protein. This prompts our bodies to build T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. So it's really either it's working with the T and the B lymphocytes, or it's coming in the back door, so to speak, as a viral vector saying, I'm here, and our body creates those lymphocytes. So that's why these are 2 shots, 21 days apart, and this one's 28 days apart. And this one, the viral vector, that is why it's only 1 shot. Because it's really taking a copy of that virus and it's going into your body. Now, the big question is, and this is a question, I'll answer this now, since you're probably wondering, well, I don't want a viral vector, and they're usually not live viruses, so they can't hurt you. But some people really don't want those things in their bodies. So can you choose which vaccine you want? And the answer is yes. If you don't want the Johnson & Johnson, you don't have to have it. If you want the Pfizer or the Moderna, all you have to do is tell where you're going or look that up and see what vaccine you would like. I will tell you that all of them will create a physical response, and that is your body working on the antibodies. It's creating those B and T lymphocytes. It's telling your body that there's a virus in there, and this is your immune system. Okay, I talked to a lot of older adults because I'm an older adult myself, and they said, hey, I feel real good. I didn't get a lot of the side effects, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but for some of those, it might be because their immune system is not working 100%. Because remember, one of the times our immune system fails or starts to decline, I should say, not fails, is in our older adult years. So, I had my shot. I had a little bit of a sore arm, and I had the chills. I didn't have a fever. I wasn't nauseated. What I've liked more of an immune response, like my 30-something-year-old son had. He had the fever, the chills, body aches. His body was working hard to give him the immunity that he needed. So know that you will have a little bit of a response, and that's your body going into action. So why do we get vaccinated? I think there's a lot of reasons that we need to get vaccinated, and one of them is that we need to protect ourselves. Studies show that COVID-19 vaccines are effective at keeping you from getting COVID-19. and it'll also keep you from getting seriously ill. There are some what they call breakthrough cases. They've been documented where people have had the shot, and then either they've had the one Johnson and Johnson or they've had the two of the Moderna or the Pfizer, and they end up getting COVID later because they're not 100%. Remember, I said science is not 100% foolproof. So if you have, a 98% coverage rate, which, they do, and you're that unlucky person that gets it, the good news on that is because you have this protection, you will have a very mild case of it. You won't need to be hospitalized. You will not be put on a ventilator, and your recovery will be much shorter. The vaccine is also an important tool to bring you closer to enjoying the activities that you've missed. I went on the Illinois Department of Public Health website today and looked, and they said you can return to your normal activities. Things you did prior to COVID-19, you can go back to doing now. Also, COVID vaccines teach our immune system how to recognize and fight the virus, and it typically takes 2 weeks after the vaccine for the body to build that protection. So if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, you're going to a big picnic this July, going to a party, you're going to see people you haven't seen before, or that you're going to be getting on a plane. You want that immunity, you need to put that about 2 weeks prior to that event, because it will take 2 weeks. And I will tell you, you can get COVID after one. My husband got COVID. He got we got our first shot on January 26th. And a week later, he tested positive for COVID. He just felt like he had a cold, and because we babysit grandchildren, I made him go get tested, and it was positive. So he wasn't protected until he had that second one. So you need to really think about planning this out and getting it done. If you're not having anything in the next couple of weeks, have it done now. It will help you, and it'll help protect other people, especially our children, because they're still working on the vaccines for them. This will just kind of give you an example of what happened to this family.
COVID-19 took my parents away from me, both my mother and my father, 18 days apart. Dropping them off, watching them walk through those doors, I remember telling myself, they'll be home soon. They'll be home soon. They'll be home in time for Thanksgiving. What's Thanksgiving without your mom and dad? To me, the vaccine means hope. There's just this hope to keep families together, keep people alive.
This is one person's story, but the story played out over and over and over. And we're all kind of feeling like this pandemic is over, but I really need to reiterate or stress that this pandemic is not over. We still have to do things, and I'll talk about that at the end, to mitigate any of this coming back. We need to make sure that we're doing certain things for the long haul. And some of these other things may not go away ever. And that's okay. It's just a different way of looking at things. So we don't want to hear stories of this again.
Cool.
So how many people have been vaccinated in Illinois? Actually, I looked that up, and I didn't change this, and I apologize, but it's 59% right now of the residents 12 and up have received their first dose. And again, this gets updated about every 7 days. What I will tell you, and we'll talk about herd immunity here, is that in order for herd immunity to work, you need about 70% of the population, minimally. So what is herd immunity? Herd immunity is when most of the population is immune to an infectious disease. It provides indirect protection or population immunity, it's also called. For example, if 80% of the population is immune to a virus, 4 out of every 5 who encounter someone with the disease won't get sick. So it really, herd immunity can work if we do it the right way. But if we're not protecting ourselves and we're not getting a large group of the population immunized, it's not going to work the way we should, and we're not going to have herd immunity. And what happens when we don't have herd immunity? People will start getting sick again. So if you're part of that, less than 70% who has not gotten vaccinated, I really encourage you to think about doing it, because you will help those other people. There are people out there that cannot get this vaccine. We're looking at the 12 and unders, and the jury's still out. They're hoping to have something by the fall, but we don't know. There's certain people who have certain diseases and allergies that can't get this. I have a daughter-in-law who had a severe reaction to her first one, and they told her not to get her second one because she had hives. So, and she's a person that reacts to a lot of things. So there are people out there that are unable to, but if you're able to, it's really a good idea to think about it. So the changes in the CDC guideline, we know that a lot of the changes, you can just go on the CDC website and look at what some of the changes are, but it basically says that if you are immunized, that you can go without a mask and you can resume your normal activities when you're not in large crowds. They still suggest that in large crowds that you wear a mask. And I probably will always wear a mask in a large crowd now, because if it's not COVID-19, it's going to be something else. I will always wear a mask when I'm flying on a plane now. I will always wear a mask when I'm in an airport, and that will be at some point an individual's choice. But like I said, it took us a while to get this pandemic, but there's another one out there lurking. We don't know when it's going to show up. It might be another 100 years, but it may not be, and we have to be prepared for it. And so I know that a lot of the restaurants are increasing their, how many people they can have in the restaurant, as long as it's summer and I can still sit outside and enjoy the comfort of friendship at a meal, I'm going to do it. If I have to go inside, most places want you to wear your mask to the table until the person takes your order. And then you can, once you start eating, you can take your mask off. I know that the gyms and the big pools have not gone to what we call phase 5 yet, which would mean that it's not by appointment only. So most of the gyms and most of the pools, indoor and outdoor pools, are still in phase 4, where they'll only allow so many people in. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's going to take time. And I know it's frustrating and people get anxious about it. It's been a long time, but we're getting there. And with the help of everybody cooperating, I understand people say this is the land of the free, but we all need to be free of illness. And one of the things that we can do to help ourselves is to protect ourselves. So the Illinois guidelines are pretty much the same as the CDC guidelines. They pretty much are saying that each county, each community, each area, each restaurant, whatever it is, can really write their own guidelines, but it can't go below what Illinois has as the guidelines. So if Illinois says that everybody still has to wear a mask, then the counties or the areas of the state, the towns, can't go below that. So, but again, we're in phase 4 right now, and we're heading, if it looks this good, we'll be heading to phase 5. But again, that's with your help and getting vaccinated. So here's some of the commonly asked questions. If I had COVID, do I still need to vaccinate? And the answer is yes. The reason why the answer is yes is because we don't know yet what kind of an antibody you get from having the COVID. And we don't know, in fact, how long our vaccines are going to work. That group of people that they're studying, as soon as they see a decline in their level of protection, they're going to start looking at, so, you know, it's if there is a second go around with boosters, it's probably, hopefully, going to go much smoother, because we'll know we are looking at that data now and anticipating what we might need. But we don't know the natural immunity people will acquire from having the disease itself. Can I choose which vaccine I receive? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. You can choose which vaccine you receive. You can go to Illinois Department of Public Health, and there's a little section, where can I get a vaccine? You click on it and it'll tell you what kind you can get. And I think I already answered this. How long will my vaccine protect me? We don't know. And we will keep you, you know, obviously media will keep you updated. You know, go in and out of the Illinois Department of Public Health website, because as soon as something is mentioned about that, they're very good about putting that on their website. Can I get COVID once I'm immunized? Yes, you can. You're more likely to get it before the first and the second one. And what happened with a lot of people is they may have become a little more cavalier after their first shot and went out without their mask on, or forgot their mask, or touched something at a grocery store and then touched their face. You can get it after both doses, or the first dose, you know, the one dose of the Johnson. But again, those are called breakthroughs, and there's a very, very low percentage of them. Do I need to wear a mask and social distance if I've had 2 of my vaccines? And right now, what they're saying in the state of Illinois is if you're at a social distance, you don't need to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated. They're still encouraging that social distancing. If you're with people who are vaccinated, you don't need to social distance, and you don't need to wear a mask. But if you're in a crowd of unknowns, and I don't know who, I was out to dinner the other night with some friends, and we weren't wearing our masks until, you know, our dinner was served, or we were drinking our beverage. And that's because I don't know who's sitting next to me. I don't know if they've had their vaccine, if they're not planning on getting one. So you have to be cautious. Can I spread COVID once I'm immunized? And the answer to that is they're uncertain, but they're pretty sure the percentage is extremely low, like less than 1%. So they're pretty sure at this point. Dr. Fauci did say next week he's almost 99.9% sure. And the reason he says that is because medicine is not an exact science. And he said 99.9% sure that you cannot spread COVID once you've been immunized. And we talked about how long the vaccine works, you know, keep yourself educated and look at that. And then as soon as they have information, if it's time and we need to get a booster, then get yourself kind of signed up, look at the news. And I would say the best news on this and where you're going to get the best information are the 3 sites that I mentioned. World Health Organization for really more widespread information around the globe, the CDC for what's going on in the United States. But if you want to look at what's going on locally, you're going to look like at IDPH, Illinois Department of Public Health. And right on their website, there's a whole COVID, you just click on it and it'll give you the sites, the type of immunization, but it'll also, if there's any updates on what's where the vaccine, how long it's working, it will let you know. Should I vaccinate my child? I hate to say absolutely yes right now. I think I need to find out more. This has to be your own decisions. And part of like 99% of me says you need to vaccinate your child so we can get that herd immunity. But I would be smart enough and I don't have any children, I have grandchildren. And so I'm going to be looking at the data and I'm going to be looking at, what are the side effects any different for a child? Are there any long-term effects? If there are none, and I would in a heartbeat get my child vaccinated. So just keep looking at the data on that and get yourself educated. And that just goes with, is it safe for my child to get a vaccine? It will be safe for your child to get a vaccine once it's out, and that's why they're taking their time with that. Again, they're hoping to get it, they're hoping to get the vaccine by the fall, but it may be a little bit later. And the reason is they want to make sure that it's safe for children. And I think I just answered that question. When will children under 12 get vaccinated? And again, we're looking at the fall. The first idea was to get them vaccinated before they all went back to school in August. But they're really looking at more fall at that point. Kids did pretty well this year when they went back to school. There were very, few compared to the general population. There were very few cases. So, can I get the vaccine when I'm pregnant? The answer to that is you need to speak to your OB-GYN about that. They all have different feels on that. You do get some vaccines at the beginning of your pregnancy. I don't know when it becomes important to not have any vaccines during your pregnancy anymore. So I would talk to my OB-GYN about that, because there is a part in your pregnancy where you don't want things that are transmissible. So again, talk to them. That's the safe thing to do. And can fully vaccinated people get COVID-19? And the answer to that is they can, but it's very minor. They call them breakthroughs. And again, if you get vaccinated and you get COVID, it's going to be a shorter, milder case. You're not going to end up in the hospital on a ventilator. And this talks a little bit about some of the COVID tests that are out there.
As part of its effort to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, FDA plays an important role in helping to support the development of accurate and reliable tests in the U.S. There are two main categories of tests in the fight against COVID-19: diagnostic tests and antibody tests. Diagnostic tests can tell you if you currently have an infection. The FDA has authorized many diagnostic tests for COVID-19, including molecular tests. Molecular tests work by looking for the virus's genetic material in a sample from you. The sample is then usually analyzed in a lab. For some tests, the sample can be analyzed at the point of care, such as at a doctor's office. FDA-authorized molecular tests are very accurate, and results are returned anywhere from minutes to several days, depending on the test. Antigen tests are another type of diagnostic test that see if there are viral proteins in a sample taken from inside your nose with a swab. These tests are often simpler and may provide results quicker than many molecular tests, sometimes within minutes in a doctor's office. Although antigen tests can be less accurate and may need confirmation with an additional diagnostic test, they can be made more widely available because they're easy and simple. The other category of test is an antibody test, sometimes called a serology test. Antibodies are produced by your body when you're infected by a virus, and they help your immune system fight off the infection. An antibody test detects antibodies to the virus using a blood sample. If an antibody test finds antibodies in the blood, it likely means the person has been previously infected with the virus. Antibody tests do not show if you have a current infection, and they should not be used to diagnose a current infection from COVID-19. The results from antibody tests can help us better understand questions about exposure to COVID-19 by helping identify who has been infected and has developed antibodies, if antibodies may provide protection from future infection, who may still be at risk, or who may be eligible to donate a part of their blood called convalescent plasma, which may serve as a possible treatment for those who are seriously ill from COVID-19. If you have questions about COVID-19 diagnostic or antibody tests, talk to your doctor. Testing is crucial to...
So the reason I bring up testing is because another question that I get asked is, if I feel sick, should I get tested for COVID? And the answer is yes. If you experience an illness similar to what we have been fighting for the last year and a half, you do need to get a COVID test, because there is that very, very small percent of that breakthrough. And so that just kind of explained that testing. The other thing that they can do now that they weren't able to do well back a year and a half ago was use something, if you do get sick, use something called monoclonal antibodies. And monoclonal antibodies are laboratory-made proteins that mimic the immune system's ability to fight off harmful pathogens, such as viruses like SARS, COVID-2, COVID-19. The problem with those, and this is what the president had when he went into the hospital. He was, from what I understand, a little sicker than what he let off to be, but he did receive the monoclonal antibodies. So they're using those more and more often now. And, but there's two things that have to happen in order to receive those. They're always given by infusion, and you have to be in a healthcare setting that can activate the emergency medical system in case there's any reaction to the monoclonal antibodies. So they work well. I have a friend that actually, she had COVID a year and a half ago, was sick, and was doing well, and then got sick again this spring. And she went over to the hospital, and they just saw her in an outpatient setting, and they used this particular outpatient setting for infusions of monoclonal antibodies. She had the infusion, she sat there for 2 hours afterwards, and she went home. So it's not a stay in the hospital, it can be done outpatient, but it has to be done in a hospital type healthcare setting. So I thought this was interesting. It's a little long. I won't have you watch the whole thing, but you know, what are we doing as we look at our next pandemic? So the World Health Organization and the Swiss Confederation today signed a memorandum of understanding to launch the first WHO BioHub facility as part of the WHO BioHub systems. And this will help look for viruses, because viruses just pop up anywhere. A lot of the coronaviruses have been bat. And so this is just a little bit of what they're doing in the Philippines.
What we're trying to look into are other strains of coronavirus that have the potential to jump to humans. And like I said, so we're doing a simulation model of the risk factors, trying to look into the possibility, what are the areas in the Philippines with all those bats with coronavirus? What are these areas that have the potential to be the ground zero for coronavirus infection? Just finished setting up a mist net. So as you can see here, it's called the mist because, well, the color is, the thread is made out of nylon. It's color black, and from a distance you can't actually see the net. So hence it's called, it blends with the forest background. So we use this for capturing bats. By using molecular techniques, molecular laboratory work, so we can determine if some of these coronaviruses have the potential to infect humans, or what you call as zoonotic to humans, that the ability of the virus to jump from an animal host to a human host. we know the virus itself and where we know where it came from, we know how to isolate that virus geographically. So we can implement some travel restrictions. We can prevent city to city, province to province transmission. I think our project has this amazing promise of possibly avoiding a next pandemic by determining where or when or possibly when this the next pandemic will occur.
So we certainly weren't prepared for this last pandemic, but I know there are people out there working on this, and we talk about the frontline people as our heroes, but I really include these people as our heroes as well, because they also risk their lives every day working in this environment to make our environment a little healthier. Our long-lasting mitigations, what are we going to do to make sure that we keep ourselves protected? And this one over here, hand washing, was always there. That is your first line of defense against any virus, bacteria, is washing your hands. Washing your hands for 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds, doing the alphabet song, row, row, row your boat, any of those, twinkle, twinkle, little star, but washing your hands. It's the time. It's also the soap. A lot of those viruses come coated with an oily film on it. And once you put the soap on your hands, they'll slide off. So it's the soap, but it's also friction. And you're getting those molecules off your hands by rubbing your hands together. Don't forget your tips of your fingers, your nails, your nail beds, your fingers in between the area between your thumb and your index finger, and make sure that you get all the way up to your wrist. People should have been doing this all the time before, and they weren't. We got really complacent, and all you have to do is go to a public bathroom to prove that fact. So make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're using a paper towel to turn off that faucet. I've noticed in a lot of public bathrooms, they're using kind of I call it a kick plate at the bottom where you can take your foot and now open the door using your foot instead of your hands. So hand washing, it's the time, 15 to 20 seconds. If you're really good, 30 seconds would be wonderful. It's the soap that's going to get that bacteria off or the virus off, and the friction. You've got to rub back and forth for the whole time that you're singing that happy song. The next thing is watch your distance from people. I think I'm very cognizant of where I am now. I don't need to be up and next to someone, and respect someone's personal space. And then our masks, and be careful with our masks, with your mask. Again, there's going to be a point where you don't have to wear them. And many of us are still anxiously wearing them because we're kind of afraid to take them off. And we'll get to a point that we do. But like I said, you may choose, like others, like myself, may choose to wear that mask at appropriate times. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The one thing I didn't get this year was the flu. And the reason many other people, our flu rate was considerably reduced this year. And that has a lot to do with hand washing, with our space, but it really has a lot to do with this. All right, not getting out there. So I definitely will be wearing my mask more during cold and flu season. It will be real interesting to see after Lollapalooza how many people who aren't immunized will get sick. This is going to be a science experiment of sorts to see how many people. If you're going down there, I would highly encourage you, and I highly encourage you anyways to get a vaccine, but if you're going to be in a group that large, consider that getting that vaccine now. So thank you everyone for coming today, and I'll give it back to Barbara.